So this is part of our continuing series on using Augmented. Today we'll be looking at how to use Vectorworks to send information over onto the Augmented side. So we're going to learn how to use the work you've already done on the Vectorworks side to make it a little faster and easier for you on the Eos side. So before we get started, here's a few upcoming sessions on our schedule. So we are, for the Eos Thursday study halls, we are going to be switching to an every other week format. We're actually going to take the next 2 weeks off, and then we'll be going to every other week for the rest of the year, with a couple of exceptions after that. So 3 weeks from today will be our next Using Augmented session. Nick's going to lead us in how to use Augmented for remote learning. And then 2 weeks after that will be our final Using Augmented session, where we'll kind of wrap up, cover any questions you might have that we haven't talked about yet, do maybe kind of an AMA style, and really just kind of put a button on this series. Later today is another hog session. They're still going strong over there too. So they're doing command the hog. So they're going to talk about how to set up a show file for success. And then just a little on later down the road, Nick is going to come back with another show control session. We did one a while back with too much applause and popularity. So we're gonna do another session there. So joining us today is Jason Perry, as always, and Nick Gomson, thank you, our FPCs in New York. Lowell Alcott is our product manager for Augmented. Thanks, Lowell. And then we have a new guest, Richard Thompson, who is one of our software developers over in the UK. So he is here to help us out. He helped write, or I guess wrote in its entirety, I'm not sure, the plugin for Vectorworks that we're going to talk about right off the bat here. So he's around to help out with any questions on that. So as usual, my standard disclaimers. So we are on beta software. Today we're going to be on build 367, which is the current beta build. So if you do have any problems or concerns about the beta software, just a reminder to use our forums for that. Please don't call phone support. They don't help out with beta software, just in general. And then if you have questions as we go today, please use the Q&A box, and we will take a couple of breaks throughout to get to those questions. And finally, as I will say, it's not our intention that you follow along live, which today would be like really impossible to follow along live anyway. But if you want to kind of follow along later, most of the information we have today will be available. I am going to use a Vectorworks file that is not yet publicly available today, but it will be when the software is released. So I'll talk about that more when we get there. Okay, so let's jump right in. So I'm going to share my screen here.
I'm just going to throw out two more quick disclaimers here. First off,
sure.
Rob is running Augmented and Vectorworks simultaneously on his computer,
okay.
And web sharing. So if things start looking a little stuttery or things like that, apologies in advance. And the other thing that I will say is we are all here to talk about Vectorworks today. I don't think any one of us on this panel claims to be a Vectorworks expert. So we will do our best, but if there are Vectorworks-based questions inside here, we'll probably be deferring you to their support, or ask you just to be a little patient while we wrap things up and get your answers to that. And I will also just add, because I just saw Dennis ask it, any word on a release date for version 3? Yes. We are in the final stretches. We are hoping to have something fully released next month. And so hopefully when Nick does that next class, we'll be able to really firmly talk about a release date. So put your calendar away, Rob. That's not fun. We are in the home stretch here, guys. Thank you all for your patience, for your help. We are super excited. We are all ready for this to be released as much as you are. So just hang out with us for a little bit longer, and we'll get it to you. So, all right, Rob, take it away.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Lowell. good, excellent point. Myself especially, are not Vectorworks experts, so forgive my fumbling along through the Vectorworks side of things here as we go. Okay, so we are going to start by looking at, this is a Vectorworks file. So I'm running today in Vectorworks 2020. We've developed everything for Augmented. You can use 2019 or 2020. There is a plugin which is on the beta forum. There is separate versions for each of those two Vectorworks versions, and there's a slightly different installation method for those. We do have documentation up on the beta forum that walks you through how to install the plugin on each of those years of Vectorworks software. So I'm not going to go through that because the documentation is really good and pretty easy to get through up on the forum there. So there's really two main things we're gonna go through today, and we'll take a Q&A break after each one. So the first one is fixture export from Vectorworks into Augmented, and then the second one is object export, and they're handled a little bit differently. As we've gone through this series, you've probably noticed that before. Like, we handle fixtures quite a bit differently than objects in the model, and this follows that idea as well. So I do have the plugin already installed. I've got it here in the Spotlight menu right here at the top. So if you don't see that export augmented, it means your plugin is either not installed or not set up on this menu. So again, check out our documentation to make sure you have that correctly installed before we begin here. Okay, so this is a file that Lowell put together a while back. This is publicly available on the Augmented page. This is in our Proscenium venue. So there's an Augmented file and this Vectorworks file available. So we've got this opened up. I haven't done anything with it other than open it. And just to show some of the data that's in here, I'm going to select channel 1 here. And in my object info doc over here, we can see we've got some XYZ data based on where it is in the model. All the fixtures in here are just pointed straight down. That was intentional so that when you're playing with this on the Augmented side, you can work with the aim tool and focus them where you want. So they do all have an XYZ of 0. And we'll change that in a minute here before we go too much further. We can see that it is a light as opposed to a moving light. We can see it's a source 426 degree. We have wattage, we have position. We have a lot of fields here, and this is all obviously on the Vectorworks side. So what we want to do is make it as easy as possible for you to take this data and get it into Eos without having to retype everything. So the data that will come across today is the fixture type, the channel, the universe/address, and we'll modify this in a moment, but there are several address fields here that are available in Vectorworks. We're really looking at the universe/address field is the one we want to use. I'll edit that in a moment. The XYZ comes across. That's going to be really valuable, as well as the rotation, so all the positional data. The gel comes across, and the beam angle on fixed lens fixtures. So not zoom fixtures, but fixed lenses come across. Currently, we do not bring over any shutter information or any gobo information. Those are things, I know gobos for sure is something we are working on. It will not be available in the first release, but that is something we want to get to pretty quickly. All right, so I've got channel 1 selected here still. So I'm going to change its address. And again, I'm going to use the universe/address field. And just to make this kind of easy to remember for all of us, I'm going to make it 1/512. And then I'm going to add some color here. Pardon my laggy computer. There we go. I'm just going to put some R80 in there. And then on the purpose, just to show these, I'm going to, this is purpose field, that's going to come across into our label field, excuse me, in patch. And then our user fields, we can kind of decide where those go. So let me just type something here. So when it comes across, we know where it came from. All right. And then I do want to focus a couple of lights just to show that data comes across. So if we go into 3D space here, I'm going to grab, so I want this one, take these two fixtures, which are 1 and 5, I believe, and I'm going to focus those on the kind of down center. There we go. So you can see those fixtures have now been tilted at kind of 45-degree angles there. There we go. My WebEx bar is covering up what I need to see. Okay, so we'll go back into our top view. And you'll see in the top view, they're still just pointed straight ahead, or in our plan view, rather, which is a function of Vectorworks, just to visually keep things clean. Okay, so we've got a good amount of data here. So I'm going to come up to our plugin and say export, and we'll just keep it on my desktop. We'll call it Proscenium, that's fine. And I'm just going to save it there. And that's it. It's that simple to export all of our fixture data. So on the Eos side, we can kind of parse that down if we don't want all of it, for example. And we'll take a look at that next. Okay, so here on the Eos side, I'm in a new show file. I'll do file new here just to make sure. I don't have any data in here. So to bring that file in that we just created, I want to go File, Import. And down at the bottom here are 2 augmented options. So we've looked at the scenic models one in previous sessions a little bit to bring in external models. We brought in that plant with a surfboard, which is kind of silly a little while ago. But this time we want to use the augmented from Vectorworks. So this is looking for that plugin that we just saved. So here's this one. There's our file that we just stored. Okay, so now we have a good handful of options of ways we can match up the data from Vectorworks with our show file. So channel address and type are automatic, so we can't change those. Fixture type, we want to instrument type. So some of these are defaulted, but they can be changed. Excuse me. So gel goes to color, so we're going to leave all those there. I'm going to set a couple of these. Oh, and I'll point out that label is purpose. That's the one where I typed in this is the purpose field, just to show that. So for text 1, I'm going to change that to our user field 1. We typed in some information there. And user field 2 here. And then just to show you, I'll go slowly now, all the different fields that we can bring in from Vectorworks that we can map into our patch data. So these are all the fields we can bring across. And then if I scroll down here, there's a couple more at the bottom. The beam angle and then position and orientation are also automatic. So we don't have the option to change those. So the next thing we need to do is map our devices. So I'm going to click that map devices button. So, oh, and some of these are already mapped from before, but I want to show you guys this anyway. Here, I'm going to unlink some of these. So if you come in from a fresh show file, here, we'll just do all of them. It will look more like this. All right, so this is what it will look like the first time you do it. So the way to map these is to select a fixture here, and you can select multiple fixtures. I'll do that in a second. And then use the search box over here. It works just like the one in Patch. So I want to say color source psych. And you pick the fixture and the mode. So I know these are in 5-channel mode, so I'm going to click link. And now that is mapped. Got a releve here. We'll say that's in standard mode. Click the link button. So then these fixtures, oh, I have one more to do. That's okay. So these 4 are all incandescent fixtures. So I can say those are dimmers. If you don't pick a fixture, it's going to default to dimmer anyway, so you don't have to do this. I know some of y'all like to create custom fixture types for 26 degrees, 19 degrees, so you could certainly map those individually to keep those conventions that you have in your show files. For today, I'm just going to put those as dimmers. Again, they will default to dimmers. You don't have to come in and map them to dimmers if they don't have anything. And then we'll do our color source par. You do have to spell it correctly. And that's in 5-channel mode. And then finally, we have series 2. And that is a daylight. And it's in that mode. There we go. So we've got all of our fixtures mapped here. So we're good there. A couple other things I'll point out is you have a fixture notes and a parameters button. So this is the same information that you can look at in Patch, but it lets us see it here. So we could double check our parameters on this mode. You know, I can switch to here and say, oh, which mode is it if you're not sure. So you do have that ability right here without leaving the screen. We can also go to fixture notes. Again, these are in from the fixture library in Patch. Okay, so we are done there. I'm going to say done. And then finally on this screen, we have an options dialog here. So if we don't want to bring everything across, we can do a starting and ending channel, kind of similar to merge a little bit. So I could say I only want 1 through 50. And then Eos will ignore anything above channel 50 that was in that Vectorworks export file. These will all default to off. I was playing with those earlier. So these 3 checkboxes, what they do, so overwrite will overwrite anything that is already in your patch. So by default, that is off. So if you have already patched some fixtures, we're going to protect that data in your show file and not have the Vectorworks data come over on top of that. If you want to use the Vectorworks data instead, then go ahead and check that box, and it will overwrite what you have in your patch already. Right now, we started with a new show file, so it won't make a difference either way. We can also tell it to not update the fixture types. So again, if we don't want that Vectorworks data coming on top of what we have, we have that option. And or we can just bring in some of the like the descriptive fields. So we're not the channel information, not the position, but just the text, notes, labels, and gels. So if we've made some changes to those, if we've updated our Vectorworks file with that information, we can just bring that across quickly without messing up our patch and our fixture types and everything. So once we have mapped our devices and got our options the way we want them, we can press OK. And before we go into Patch, I just want to look at our model real quick. And I should have showed this earlier, but I promise it was blank. So we have brought in all of these fixtures from our Vectorworks file. notice they're all pointed straight down, just like they were, except for those two that we aimed in the Vectorworks file. So those look correct. So a real quick way to bring in the entire rig, not only the channel data, but also the position in space. So let's look at this in patch. We'll go up to channel 1 here. So you can see they all have XYZ positional data. A couple of them, most of them have orientation of zeros, and that's because that's what it was getting from Vectorworks. 1 and 5 are the ones we pointed, so those have orientation. If we look at channel 1 specifically, that's our address that we punched in Vectorworks, so that came across. Our purpose populated our label field. You'll notice that beam angle is 18 degrees, so that is the actual beam angle of the fixture. That data is in Vectorworks. So this is a 26-degree fixture, but Vectorworks is using the beam angle function, so that's why that's there. If we come to our, let's see here, if we come to our database field, Richard, our text 1 and text 2 didn't come across, so I may have done something incorrectly there, but those should have come across, I think. We mapped those, so I'll have to see what I did wrong there. But any of these text fields that we've mapped in that import should populate here with the data that we assigned to them. And then in our augmented tab, we can see the positional data just a little more clearly here. So all of these fixtures, I'm now going to scroll down through patch here. So these are dimmers. These are all of our source 4 units. Get to here's some of our color source pars that came across. There's no address information here because there was nothing in Vectorworks. I can certainly add it here as, like I've always been able to do. There's our series 2 fixtures. So the Vectorworks file only had the channel and type data. So that's what got pulled over. And then I'm going to go back to our model here. And if we look at, let's be live. So if I turn on 1 through 5, just to show these. So 1 to 5 are pointed, and I can certainly re-aim those using our aim tool and patch if they're not perfect. And then the rest of those are pointed straight down. So a really quick way to pull over a ton of information into your augmented model. So that is fixture export. Why don't we go ahead and open up the phone lines, Jason, and see what questions people have.
Excellent. Yes, I'll get a couple questions in here. All right, let's start. You had mentioned that the angle that's coming in from Vectorworks is the beam angle. Is there a way to change that to a field angle?
I don't think on the import we can. I mean, you could change it in Vectorworks. Let's look, and Richard, feel free to chime in while I'm.
Yeah, you can map the beam angle to any field you like. That's in that drop-down list. So that certainly includes field angle. It would also include things like channel, but you probably don't want to do that. So yeah, if you've normally used some other field, then you can use that instead. Like if you want to use a field, for example.
See how that worked. Still says 18, but again, I'm sure it's user error here. But that was.
Yeah, but we can manually put that in afterwards, correct? We can always make adjustments.
You can definitely manually put it in augmented, absolutely.
Yeah, the angles are a little bit of a tricky thing. It's one that a lot of people refer to sort of interchangeably. So, we can do our best to get you in a direct place, but as Jason mentioned, you always have the opportunity to just quickly select everybody and batch change them if you need to fix that. Rob, when you did do that, I did see when we switched to augmented real fast, your beam did change shape. So I think we're there.
Okay, just in patch it still says 18. But
I missed that, but.
All right. Can the dimmer field in Vectorworks be used to pull your addresses in through to Eos?
let's go back here. I know it's using the universe address. Where's the dimmer?
This one is one where it depends whether you're using 2019 or 2020.
Okay.
In 2019, Vectorworks has a way of mapping what the patch is supposed to be, and so that you definitely can. In 2020, it tries to work out what you mean and fill out universe address no matter what you do. But I'm not sure what it does for dimmer specifically.
All right. So to play off this part a little bit, when you bring something in from Vectorworks into Eos, will it overwrite any channels that are not patched in the Vectorworks patch if it's blank?
Oh, so if you're bringing in if you've got stuff already patched inside of Eos and then you're bringing in a subset, no, it will not overwrite that. So any data, and this is kind of following the rules we've done with LightWrite for a while now. Any data that is already there that doesn't have a complementary data set coming in will be left alone.
Okay. Can you set it to not overwrite a particular field when you do an import so that it changes some info but not specifically the patch or the fixture mode?
Yeah, we haven't tackled a full merge concept inside here, so it is a little bit of all or nothing within those options that Rob showed you. That's something we'll take a look at in the future, be a little bit more granular with.
Okay.
At the moment, you can say this particular field, don't touch it, but it means don't touch it for anything.
Okay. Does the fixture mode in the OIP in Vectorworks connect at all?
Not really. Modes are something that everybody sort of talks about a little bit differently. So we always want you to do that sort of manual mapping concept to make sure that we are talking about exactly what fixture mode you're in. Richard, we had some conversations about that, trying to standardize it, but it's just a little all over the place, right?
Everyone uses slightly different names. And when real fixture modes differ by one letter, we can't really start guessing.
That's fair. Can you save your mapping to recall for future imports so that it becomes automated the second and third and fourth time you do this?
Yeah, and that's kind of what Rob was running into when he first started up, where he had done his test run and the mapping was still there. So if you have mapped it, the next time you come in, it will try to suggest that for you. You always have the ability to unlink and relink there. I definitely think that that's something you should always check when you're importing. Just make sure that mapping is indeed what you want, since it is pretty crucial.
And that mapping's in the show file, right?
No, I think that's actually a desk setting.
Is it?
It seemed, I did a deep clear, and that seemed to remove the mapping.
Yeah, I think
if that is a clue as to where it's stored.
Okay, excellent.
I'm not 100% certain on that, but I'm pretty sure that's desk.
All right. Do focus points come over from Vectorworks?
I don't actually remember. Richard, do you remember that? I know we had chatted about doing that, but did we bring focus points into reference points?
I don't remember. We use the focus point to focus a fixture if it does not have, if it's a static fixture and doesn't have X, Y, Z, or rather, they're all zeros.
Well, you have a focus point in there, and I'm not seeing it inside your model. So let's say no right now, and I will make sure that that's a useful thing to do.
Yeah, I believe there was a discussion a while back about what would be most useful to bring them in as.
That's right.
which I guess is an open question.
More on that soon.
All right. So does the orientation of the fixtures come from the focus point, or is it the 3D orientation of the fixture itself in Vectorworks?
Yeah, the short answer is both. Basically, if you have it aimed at a focus point, it will use it. If you don't, it will use the XYZ rotations. Okay.
And is there a way to import just the position data and not the rest of the data? Is that just unselecting all of the other imports, or?
There didn't seem to be a way to deselect a few fields, so we'll do this again. So like channel address and type, it appears at this time you can't deselect those, but same with position and orientation. Because obviously we have to know what channel to assign those things to.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. How are two-ford units handled?
I am not sure how to two-for them in Vectorworks, but I would assume two-for meaning they have the same address. Like we can do that real quick. If we give channel 2 1/512 as well. I mean, I would assume they would come over as two different parts. Lola, Richard, DL.
Yeah, they'll
no,
need to
for
have
sure.
the same desk channel number if they're physically two-ford.
Oh, yes, of course. Sure that took, okay. Check our mapping, and you'll notice that mapping is all still there to confirm that question. Oh, I didn't say overwrite though, so that may not have worked. Yeah, let's do that with an overwrite. I mean, Richard, I would think that overwrite button would like go over whatever was there. Let's try.
Yeah, it's possible that's not working quite right yet.
Oh, yes, of course. So channel 2 isn't there. That makes sense, but we should have. Oh, I see. This is user error. I need to make this one have a different. Well, actually, so if they were two-ford, they would be on the same dimmer, and we have one position here. So that's. We go live. I think this is the question we were trying to get to. Yeah, I seem to have lost the other fixture.
I will take a look at that. I know there's been a couple of oddities with importing and two-fors and things like that. I thought we had gotten them all wrapped up, but Richard and I will chat with some other members of the team and figure out what's going on there.
I'll note that down on my list.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Good question.
All right. Just a note from Gary. It looks like he says something to point out is that when importing augmented, we'll use the Vectorworks origin, not the user origin. So just be aware when you do an import, it will take the Vectorworks origin.
Yep. Yeah, and I have that note somewhere on here too. Yes, the internal origin. We're always going to use the internal origin. That's correct. Thank you.
how does it deal with fixtures in Vectorworks if you haven't assigned a channel to it yet? What's the minimum amount of data you need to enter on the Vectorworks side for it to come through in Augmented?
That's a good question.
Minimum is the channel number, really. Well, a type and a channel number, but you can't add a thing without having a type. So
But that was one of the decisions we made early on in Augmented. Is Augmented doesn't care about address. As long as it is part of a channel with position data, it'll show up in Augmented. So, well, it's kind of impossible, I guess, to have a fixture in Vectorworks without position data, but channel would be your minimum requirement, absolutely, as Richard said. There was another question that I answered in the Q&A that was there a way to have something in Augmented without assigning a channel to it yet? And the answer to that is no. You know, we chose not to care about an address, but we definitely do care about channel.
Yep. We get a number of suggestions on how to do twoffering. We will look at a lot of them, and we will let you know if any of them work. But I want to move forward and not kind of do more testing right now. It looks like most of these questions are still twofer questions, and again, we'll play with that a little bit. You were about to talk, Lowell?
Yeah, I was just saying there, Mr. Simmons was asking about unmapping. You can unmap the address data, but you can go into options, selection, say ignore certain pieces of data. And that is true. We do have a couple that are required. Those are going to be marked as automatic, but anything that has a little caret drop down next to has an option for ignore, so you can choose not to bring in that information. But things like position, channel, address, type, they're all going to be required.
Excellent. I think that is all the relevant questions right now.
Great. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at is how to import scenery. So for this, let me get my screen situated here. So I'm going to use, this is the part where I'm going to use a file that is not publicly available yet. It will be when we release the software. So you guys can get a sneak peek of our Mind the Gap file. So this is the file that has been in our new, or our updated education videos and trainings. So far, you've seen it as a capture file, but we now will, when the software is released, we will have it as a Vectorworks file that you can have, and then it will also be in Augmented as a model as well. So for scenery, scenery is handled a little bit differently. We do need to export this into a file type. We are strong proponents of the collada format. So, of course, Vectorworks has a ton of things you can export to, but today we're just going to be using the collada format, which is the .dae. It seems to bring over the most useful information for us on the EOS side. So in order to export an object, we need to hide everything we don't want. The fixtures don't matter. I'm going to hide those just so we can see what we're doing here. And anything we bring across, we'll look at a couple examples of this, is going to come over as one object. So it may make more sense to bring things over one at a time rather than your entire model, because then it's going to behave as one object. There are some exceptions to that if it's been built in Vectorworks using the classes, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. So right now I'm going to hide everything except my masking. My computer is doing the best it can today. All right, I think that's everything. Okay, so I've hidden everything except my masking. So I do want to export that, and we're going to export a few different things here. So I've just turned off the visibility on the Vectorworks side. So I'm going to say export collada, and I do get some options here. I'm just going to keep the defaults. for today. They work really well. So I'm going to call this, we'll just keep everything on my desktop for today. We'll call this masking. And then the next thing I want to do is my scenery. So we can go ahead and hide the masking. And I'm going to bring it over mostly as one piece with a couple of exceptions. There we go. So I'm going to hide the drummer because I want to bring that person over independently. And if I'll try and zoom in so you guys can see a little better. There we go. So our drummer just disappeared. Just show you again here. There they are. Okay, so we're going to hide the drummer, and we're going to hide these crates underneath the lead singer. There we go. Okay, so we've got all of our scenery except for those crates and except for our drummer. So we're going to export that. We'll call that scenery. And now I want to export just the crates and just the drummer by themselves. All right, so we'll hide everything else. We'll do our crate first. Actually, I'm sorry, we're going to come back to the crate at the end. So let's just do our drummer. And they're kind of just floating in space there because they're on top of a piece of scenery on their drum stool. All right, so here is drummer. Okay, and then the last thing we need is our actual venue itself. So we're going to hide the drummer. And bring in our stage house. And you'll notice that this file has been built in a very thoughtful way. Thank you, Mr. Gonson. Where all of these things are separated into different classes, so I can easily turn them on and off and manipulate them separately. They're labeled clearly. So all of these things will help you when it comes to bring objects over to Augmented. Okay, so we've exported the scenery, the masking, and the stage house, our venue, and the drummer. So let's come over onto the Eos side. And the lights are going to look a little weird when we do this because remember these fixtures are from a different show file. We'll just ignore that for the time being. Okay, so to import scenery, we're going to use this import menu again. So in our browser, file, import, and then this time we want to use augmented scenic models. And again, we did this earlier a couple sessions ago with that plant that we found from the internet. So let's bring in our venue first. So here's our venue. And again, it's that .dae format, which is Collada. And when I bring this in, I'm going to get this pop-up box. So these, I'm going to bring in the origin as model. And then when we bring in our drummer, we'll look at a different option here. So as a refresher, we can change the scale of our object here if we want to. I'm going to leave everything as it was because I know it was drafted correctly in Vectorworks in the right scale. So the origin as model, that's going to use, again, that Vectorworks internal origin. So I'm going to say OK. And notice how it doesn't appear in my model yet. It's just over here in my browser. And I did not delete the ones from my practice run. So let's go ahead and delete those. So we just have our fresh copies here. OK, and now we need to bring in our scenery. And I want that to be origin as model. And we need to bring in our masking. Also origin as model. OK, so now I need to bring these into my space. Let's collapse that down. So we'll go ahead and do the venue first. Right here, and again, these lights are they're all really low because they're from our other venue. So that's why they're incorrect. We'll bring out our scenery, and I'm going to bring in our masking. Okay, so the way, get our camera situated a little bit here. All right, so and now that they're in the model, they'll show up obviously there, but then also in our hierarchy down here. So right now, let's take masking, for example. Because we brought over the masking together, I didn't bring over each leg individually, for example. I can move or scale this object together. So all the legs are going to move, but my scenery and my venue are not going to. And because we used the as model origin, where it comes in is going to be 0, 0, 0 here. So if I select my scenery, you'll see everything is at all zeros, our venues at all zeros. So they're all going to be in relation to each other, just like they were in the Vectorworks model. If we bring in something with a different origin, so let's look at the drummer now. Actually, before we do that, let's take a look at expanding these. So because I mentioned these were built thoughtfully using classes in Vectorworks. So if I come to scenery here, and I right click and say expand, I get my caret now. And I have to expand down a couple levels, but I will eventually get to, so I believe these are the layers here. And then if I go into scenery, I get my classes. So I can, so these are our people. And again, these labels are, I can relabel these right here. These are pulled over from the Vectorworks data. But since this was constructed in such the way that it was, I can now move just this person, even though I brought it over as an entire object. So I could maybe move this person downstage. Wherever I want them to be. Maybe they need to be over here. So now, and then if I go back up and collapse all my arrows, and I can actually just come up to my main object and say collapse, and it will do all that for me. So this, this sub object, if I select my scenery again, it will now move, and I move everything. It's going to move in relation with everything. So there is a way in Augmented to break down your model pieces. So if you've built your Vectorworks file that way, you don't necessarily have to export every single piece, every crate and box and door and table separately. You do have this option in Augmented to edit and move those around. Now, I will say, if you want to associate objects with channels like we did a couple weeks ago, so our scenic object movables and non-movable channel types, then those will have to be separated out from the model. So if you need to control these with queues, or in a way you control a channel, just think about how you want to interact with your objects. Like, do you just need to maybe turn this person off sometimes, or are you going to be doing a lot? It probably makes more sense to do that with the channel than coming into the editor constantly. Okay, so the last thing I want to show is that other origin. So if we import, so I'm back here in the browser in the import menu. If I find my drummer, so this time I'm going to, instead of doing as model, I'm going to import ground, which will put the model origin at the bottom of the object, so the drummer's feet, basically. So when I do this and bring the drummer into the model, it's going to put that object at the origin of my augmented model, not where it was in the Vectorworks model, which is behind the drums. So now my position is 0, 0, 0 here, and then to put them on the drum kit, I have to, we'll just rough that in there, and now my position is reflecting that here. So again, this isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to do this. It's what's more useful for you, how much you can be moving this object around. So if we redid this, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the drummer, by drummer, and I'll delete it over here, and then I'm going to re-import it using the as model option. So now when I drag it in, it's going to be, that drummer is going to be exactly where they were in the Vectorworks model. But the difference is now the origin is zeros here instead of zeros at my model origin. So again, depending on, if the drummer is mostly going to be in that spot behind the drums, maybe it's okay that that's the origin. If I'm going to be moving an object around a lot and it's useful for me to know where it is on stage, then I would probably want to bring it in with a center or ground origin so that it starts in my model at 0 and I can choose and measure where it goes when I'm moving it around in the augmented world. Okay, so the last thing we are going to do here is we're going to go back to Vectorworks. And we're going to look at bringing in textures. So I'm going to hide my stage house, and I'm just going to unhide those crates that we left out earlier. So it is that one. There we go. So we'll zoom in, and then just to show how textures come over. So I'm going to go to properties, and again, I am not a Vectorworks expert, so please be kind on your questions here. So I'm just going to give it, we'll make this one a yellow plastic, just so it's kind of obvious. And I'm going to make this crate, so we're just selecting the one. We'll do that one as a blue. Sure. Okay. So I've given these textures on the Vectorworks side. So now I'm going to export to Collada. And we'll call this crates. And then back on the Eos side, let's refresh that. So when we bring in our crates, I'm going to say as model, so they show up right underneath the singer where they should. And when we drag these in, so now those are showing up with those textures and different colors that we had in our model. And just to show what this gets us, we'll go ahead and say done and apply changes. There we go. computer's trying, y'all. So if we turn off these fixtures, and I know that 128, channel 128 and 133 are over that crate. So I'm just going to turn those on and come up, and if I play with my color picker, you can see that those are going to react differently because they have, here, let me zoom in. To where you can see. So those are going to react to those colors in a way similar to, how real colors would react. And our standard disclaimer is we are not trying to be 100% visually accurate on here. So again, I've said this before, but adding textures may not be worth your time for what you need to get out of the software. Maybe it is. So like with everything in the software, Magic Sheets or an easy example, the more you put into it, the more it will give you, but you also have the ability to get things going really quickly if that's what you need for your situation. Okay, so why don't we go to questions about object export, import. What we got, Jason?
We had a number of texture questions, so I'll just hit that now. We've answered most of them. What about reflective textures?
I think I'm going to defer a lot of these to Lowell.
That's something we will continue to work on over time, but just going with the batch level right now.
Yeah, the bump map question, yes, we do bump maps. Whether they're worth the extra CPU time is a different question, but they're there.
Excellent. Does it matter what scale we're drafting this in Vectorworks?
Short answer is no. Slightly longer answer is make sure you draw it at the actual size. If you're using feet or inches or furlongs, that's all fine. But just make sure it's the real size in the real world.
All right.
Otherwise, your 19-degree beam is going to be a lot bigger or smaller than you expect it to be.
All right. If the origin is the same in augmented model space and Vectorworks, won't that eliminate the oddity of the object origin when it is imported?
So I think I understand the question. So like when I brought in the drummer, it placed it in the correct location, which obviously was not on the origin in either space. It's offset, so it's offsetting it from the Vectorworks internal origin, but it's not giving us those dimensions on the augmented side. I don't know if that answered the question, but so it's when it comes in, it's physically in the right place. Maybe the drummer was 6 feet upstage, 8 feet stage left, but those numbers are not reflected on the object. If I want to see those numbers, then I have to bring it in at 0, 0, 0, and then drag it into the correct place.
Okay. Just some clarifications. When importing a layer, will it break out the classes and the subcarets if they are on?
Well, I'll let Lowell take this one.
I'm pretty sure it will. Some of this is a little tricky. As Rob mentioned, we recommend the collodiform because it includes a lot of this information. If you're using other exports, you might lose some of that. But basically, as much information that comes to us is what we will allow you to have. So I believe that is correct.
Okay.
To expand on that slightly, in the export collider options, there's some settings where you can tell Vectorworks how you'd like it to organize it. So you could tell it native Vectorworks organization, which is what we've done here, or you could tell it to sort by class, or texture, or fill color, or line color. Most of the time, you probably want the native one if you've set out using a nice hierarchy, as Rob showed you.
Okay.
So that actually takes us nicely into that next question about if you don't hide the rig, it'll bring those Vectorworks objects over and muddy the 3D model. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. If you're going into Vectorworks' export functionality, you are exporting a collada for everything that is visible or whatever settings like Richard just mentioned. So definitely hide those fixtures. I will admit I have forgot to do that many times importing my model, see all the fixtures, go back over, do it again. That it is a little bit of a bummer that right now we have to ask you to split this into two different functionalities, bring your fixtures over and bring your scenic elements over. We've been chatting with our friends over at Vectorworks and seeing if there's a way we could streamline that a little bit. No news on that quite yet, but the collada export is 100% of Vectorworks functionality. It doesn't have anything to do with our plugin. So that's the rules they've established.
Okay.
And those fixtures would come over as dumb objects.
Objects,
They're not going to function as fixtures.
Yeah, it's just models.
All right. Related to this, do we have any stability issues with reorganizing the hierarchy in a way that pulls models out of the original dropdown to organize things such as hanging positions? So if on the hierarchy side of it, if we pull things out and move things around?
As I think Rob's about to demonstrate.
Let's see.
You can move things around in the hierarchy, and they'll stay in the same place on stage, but they'll have a new parent.
But can we pull them out completely? So yes.
You're probably going to want to rename that once you do that. So it's not.
You don't like NURBS?
Yeah. Yeah, the names that Vectorworks gives to some of the sub-objects can be really, really quite weird and confusing.
Yeah, so that's one of our borders. So I
guess
might.
what we'll say here, Rob, is if you think that you're going to need that level of organization and functionality, I would recommend doing those as separate imports. Then you don't have to worry about breaking that up. It shouldn't be any issue with doing that, but just from an organization and trying to figure out what's what, if you know that you want your hanging positions to be in there, I would highly suggest taking a look at either adding a pipe object inside of Augmented or bringing in that export separately. Anything that you're going to do a lot of interaction with, you're probably going to want a separate piece.
Okay. And another question building off that, hanging positions. Is it better, are those imported through fixture import or object info?
Objects. Those are, you're going to want to bring those in through Scenic. We do not do anything with Vectorworks' hanging position concept yet.
Excellent. What is the consensus on collada file sizes? Is there a max file size that we would recommend for bringing stuff in?
I think this goes back to some of the conversations we had with Magic Sheets. If you're going to put a 2 gig JPEG texture on your model, expect it to slow down. Textures are really the things that we worry about the most when it comes to file size, and massive amounts of triangles are what we worry about when it comes to for imports. Actually, Rob, why don't you talk about the triangle indicator and some of the things that we have up at the top of the hierarchy?
Yeah. So this guy, I guess we didn't talk about this last time. So if I hover over my, here we go, my triangle here, it'll give me a little report, which is also down here. So the higher the number of triangles, the more processing you're going to need to run the model. So this is telling me I have an overall performance rank of very low, which my computer is also trying as hard as it can. So again, I'm not a Vectorworks drafter, but it sounds like I know the fewer the triangles, the better it's going to run. Are there any tips we can share here about how to reduce that number of triangles?
You know, the biggest thing I can say is be careful with your export. You know, hiding things that you don't need. We did I think it was LDI. We did an export for LDI last year, and I went in there, and there were just millions of triangles. And I realized that the scenic designer actually had screws in there. And each screw had like 1,000 triangles. And there was so much. So stuff, you know, just be simple, right? If you have a platform, does it have to have the crown molding? Does it have to have, you know, all of the railings? Or can it just be the platform and, you know, your edge? Just make decisions about what you can live with, what you can live without. You know, obviously for us, the biggest thing that we're looking for are surfaces you're actually going to be focusing light on. You know, does it have to be a fully textured, both physically and applied texture thing? That's up to you. But that's a place where you're really quickly going to eat up complexity. You know, as Rob was showing you with that crate, does it need the crossbars? Does it need all of that? Or could it just be a cube or a square? You know, different options there. At the end of the day, if you have a computer that's butch enough to handle this, you probably won't notice anything. But if you're trying to run a really complex rig, you know, you might want to make some decisions about what's the best thing to bring over. Again, this kind of goes back to our age-old conversation here about visualizer versus programming tool. What is the minimum you need to focus some lights on some things?
And I'll hop in just from
Vectorworks have a couple of things to help you with those in the export options. There's a render mode where you can choose fast, and it will simplify some things for us.
I think having worked on the on that file that Rob's looking at now, the Mind the Gap file, you know, as Lowell said, when you pull stuff off the internet, that stuff oftentimes is built for like engineering specifications. So it has every detail of every little thing. So what I've actually been doing is going through and redrafting a lot of those objects to get rid of that complexity. You know, do I need that drum kit to have every handle, every intersection? You know, so sometimes it takes a bit of redrafting, and I think, again, for what you're going to be using it for, which is programming and interacting, do you really need every single detail of that, or do you need like a cube that is approximately the same size? That will get your triangle count down significantly if you can reduce a lot of that detail really quickly, because Rob's looking at it. Those cylinders that are on the turntable, in the original Mind the Gap model, they are cylinders but individual tubes that create the outside. For this, I just reduced it down to a cylinder, right? So make choices about how much detail you really need and what performance you need.
All right. If a lighting position object is imported, will the fixtures that were on that position in Vectorworks know they're linked to that object if that object gets flown up or down? Or is there another step needed to match those two together?
Yeah, so...
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
So they will align correctly. They should if everything is done correctly. But to link them, you will have to drag those fixtures onto the object in the hierarchy. And we did that at some point in one of these videos with a piece of truss and some fixtures. The only difference was the truss was a stock object from Augmented. We hadn't imported it, but it will work the same way.
All right. If you have classes and layers that are hidden or not shown in Vectorworks, when you export them, will they import or will they stay hidden or not used?
Does any of that data come across at all,
Here,
Richard?
I'll take that.
Well, yeah.
So, if you are talking about their Collada or whatever scenic elements model export, it is based off of visibility. Dependent on your settings when you go to export, they'd ask you what you want to do, but the default is it's based on visibility. Richard, correct me if I'm misspeaking a little bit here, but we grab all fixture data regardless of visibility and then allow you to change that on the EOS import.
Now that's right. Every fixture is grabbed, whether it's currently on or off, well, visible or invisible, rather.
Excellent. Question about the first section. What's the difference between type and fixture type?
I can take that. I actually just had to ask that same question, so I went to one of the other developers and found out. So apparently this is actually a little bit of a carryover from Lightwrite, when Lightwrite has a device type and a fixture type, but we treat them basically the same. Type is the priority. It's what's marked as automatic in the Vectorworks import field. Fixture type is secondary. So if you're bringing this over from Vectorworks, you're always going to be using type, not fixture type. But if for some reason there wasn't a type, we would go to fixture type as a backup.
All right.
Good question. I had to look that up.
So we know Vectorworks is a big standard in our industry, but are we talking about possible session for capture since it works so differently, or any of the other import tools that we have?
Yeah, so let's talk about that from two different directions. So if we are talking about scenic elements, you really can bring things in from anywhere, including Capture 2020's GI TF exports. But if you are talking about fixtures, we're really only doing that from Vectorworks right now. We've had some conversation with our friends over at Capture. It's definitely something we'd like to add, but for right now, the only place we're actually getting true fixture information is from Vectorworks. But we've added for scenic elements, so Capture's the GITF. I always want to make sure I'm saying that acronym right. Export.
GLTF.
GL. I'm sorry. That's an L.
Yeah, there's way too many acronyms.
There really are. Thank you, Richard. And we also have added support for SketchUp import with a couple of caveats. So SketchUp doesn't bring textures over, and a couple other things, but trying to make the scenic elements as approachable as possible. But yeah, just Vectorworks for fixture information right now.
Excellent. So that's it for questions. One comment is asking if we've seen the triangle count on the Hamilton model, which is pretty large.
But it's so cool. There you go. There's my official statement. High triangles are okay if it's cool.
If it's Hamilton. Richard, we kind of touched on this at the very beginning. Could we talk about 2019 versus 2020 and some just things to look out for Vectorworks 2019 and 2020 when going between them, or how the rules there work? I know you're intimately familiar with those things, Richard.
Yes, basically, Vectorworks have greatly improved how they're dealing with DMX patch in Vectorworks 2020. So in 2020, it works really nicely. You type in one number in one box, and all the others update, so it makes sense. All nice and automatic. Vectorworks 2019 didn't have that, which means that instead of it all being automatic, you need to make sure that when you do the Vectorworks export, you've already set up your Vectorworks mapping. I think they call it vision mapping, in order to line up which property in that big property editor you've actually used for your DMX address and universe. The side effect of that is if you've drawn your thing all nicely in Vectorworks 2019 and then convert it to Vectorworks 2020, Vectorworks will try to convert it so all of that DMX patch is correct. However, because everyone did it slightly differently, they don't always get it right. So if you're upgrading a model from Vectorworks 2019 to Vectorworks 2020, you'll need to check the patch. If you're being consistent and the first one's right, then the rest will be right, of course, as it'll apply the same rules for all of them.
Great, thank you.
I guess back to that original question, no, we don't really have a preference between 2019 and 2020. They just handle things a little bit differently and use whatever you got.
Well, that's all I had. If there's no other questions, Jason, we'll just make this be a little bit shorter of a session this week.
Yeah, we got nothing coming through right now. It's not too many questions right now.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everybody. Richard, thank you for joining us from the UK. Nick and Jason and Lowell, thank you for joining as always. And as a reminder, we will be back 3 weeks from today. So we're taking the next 2 weeks off for a little summer break. And then after that, we'll do every other week. But that will all be posted on our social media and on our study hall webpage. And if you guys have any other questions after the fact, you're always welcome to email any of us, and we'll get you taken care of.
And Rob, I believe you mentioned that this Vectorworks file is going to be available when we release. Is that correct?
Yes, so this will be part of the education package. We'll have a workbook, an augmented workbook with show file, including this Vectorworks file, paperwork, all those things. So definitely look for that when 3.0 is released. All right.
Closer every day. Richard, thanks again for joining us and keeping us honest. We appreciate it.
All righty. We will see you guys at the next one. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.